Hello, everyone. I'm happy to present here. So I was asked to present a little bit about Colony, and I've gone through so many talks about Colony in the various different aspects, and I thought I'll try to highlight something different today than we usually talk about, and that's I want to answer the question we always get asked, so how does Colony differ from Aragon? How does it differ from DAO Stack, and what is it that's unique to us? So my title is There's More to a DAO Than Voting. So let's start with what is a DAO, because I'm going to bring some examples that you might not even have thought of as being a DAO. The first one is a multi-sig wallet. A multi-sig wallet is a DAO in the most basic sense that there's multiple actors who have to take actions, and the result of which is a transfer of funds. And so it's a baby DAO, but let's call it a DAO. And my contention is that the other DAO projects we've seen so far are all of this category. They're all just glorified multisigs. I mean, in some sense, right? They're very complex rules of interaction, but it's always you make a proposal, the proposal goes up for a vote, there's a quorum, votes get counted, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, the end result is funds move, right? So that's all this multi-sig pattern, right? You require an action, and if nothing happens, nothing happens. They're very static and bureaucratic, but you can make really complicated rules in thousands of participants if you want, because counting votes is not that hard. But that's sort of one model. Another DAO that you might not have thought of as a DAO, but I'd like to bring up is, for example, Bitcoin. The Bitcoin network has multiple different actors with their own incentives and their own actions, and the whole thing chugs along, and there's a tremendous amount of activity in the world from, these mining centers that spring up and all kinds of, this ATM network. So there's a lot of dynamics there. It's decentralized. It's not run by any one entity, and there's many different actors, but it's definitely an organization. It's definitely autonomous, and it's decentralized. So Bitcoin, the blockchain, is a DAO. It's just, it has its incentives and proceeds according to them, but it's completely ungovernable. I mean, we've seen that past year. It's very strongly executing on its coded set of incentives, but there's no governance mechanism. So it's an ungovernable DAO, but it definitely is a DAO. And if you can already tell by the layout of my slides, I'm going to pitch Colony somewhere in the middle. So Colony, we'd like to think of as being far more active and alive than one of these multi-sig DAOs. In a Colony, there'll be continuous allocation of resources, a continuous action of funds, and a Colony can proceed and do its thing without requiring action. You don't need to put a proposal and wait for votes, wait for a quorum, and then execute on that. The whole thing just keeps chugging along, and it is steerable. That is, we have a reputation system where people can divert funds from one domain to another, can push things one way, push things the other, speed up a process, slow down a process, and yes, ultimately stop a process in a dispute and force a vote. But that is the exception, not the rule. So it's a very dynamic, continuously allocating system. That's Colony. It's a very generic framework. We want you to be able to align incentives around some goal. In Bitcoin, it's the goal of hashing things, I suppose. Well, no, there's an incentive for producing hashes, and it works really well, and people spend millions on building hashing machines. With us, it's more like a human level thing. Like the tasks you set are written by humans. The evaluation on whether those tasks are met are done by humans. They're mediated through smart contracts, but you can align your Colony to pursue any goal, and then proceed along, to fulfill that goal. And that could be something like, making an entry for the Hyperloop project, right? That was a nice online collaboration that was screaming out for a DAO because they needed to manage their funds collectively. But so that's sort of the generic framework. We're not saying what each Colony has to do, but you set your goal, you set your task, and then it's up to the humans to evaluate what's going on. But you no longer need an action for things to keep moving. So it's designed to obstruct. It's designed not to obstruct any actions. That is to say, we can have our weekly call and we decide what we all do, and I just create some work that needs to be done. I allocate the funds, That's all that needs to happen. The funds will be allocated over time. The more reputation I have, the faster it'll happen. But I don't need to ask for permission. We don't need to go through this endless bureaucracy. Yeah. So I don't want to talk much about the dispute system because I do that a lot in other talks. But essentially, there's a fallback mechanism that when we're all in each other's hair fighting about can't agree on something, you can stop a process and then force a vote. Yes, there are still votes there. It's the ultimate arbiter when you can't decide. But it's discouraged, and it's certainly not the day-to-day activity. And I mean, if you think in a large company, on a boardroom, you might have proposals and votes. But within your team, within your work group, that's not how you do your day-to-day activity. It can't be that bureaucratic. So if we're trying to make online collaboration on the scale of companies and even larger, we need to have different forms of interaction than just the boardroom level one. So that's what Colony tries to do. These are the various elements we have to enable us to be this dynamic. All right, I'll be very quick. Funding queue, for example, is an interesting one. It's when there's lots of proposals on what needs to be done. You can add your reputation backing to any proposal you see. They will be ordered by the backing that they have, and they will get funded from the most reputation on down. So if you make an unpopular proposal, it sits at the bottom of the queue. It'll never get funded. We don't ever have to deal with it. And the popular ones, they'll get funded. We don't ever have to vote. As long as there's enough reputation saying, let's do it, it will happen. So that's a very dynamic thing. And this will not be stopped. It's continuously running. And as people create new proposals, they will get filled one after the other after the other. It's a very, I do want to say has a very different feel to it than an Aragon DAO, which is static unless humans interact to trigger actions. Here they are continuously going on. And it's all mediated through a reputation system which we find is important from a political and moral point of view because it's not a voting token. You can't buy a token and then control a colony. You have to earn your voting weight. You have to earn your right to direct funds by doing work. So yeah, we have various different techniques for allocating funds, for evaluating work. But the end result is we want to be able to dynamically do work without bureaucracy getting in the way. And I feel like even, it's early days yet, but I feel like we're offering a different vision than these other DAOs, which are, yes, more of the multi-sig variety. So, thank you. Let's have some questions. All right.
Okay, I love this, and it's very much, it's like a duocracy, and I like that it has some checks and balances. My question is about externalities. Like in our current economic system, we have something we call externalities, like air is an externality that somehow we've managed to damage. And in your colonies, like people are doing work, and that work might have influence on their neighbors. I'm just going to say neighbors for the sake of argument, and they don't have to include them in their colony. So I feel like in that is similar to like how capitalism is. There's like all these things that we don't take into account when we make decisions and do. How do you handle that kind of externality and different perspectives?
Well, that's a very good question. Like, I don't know that each colony will handle its neighbors as it should. However, I find that the colony framework, on the flip side, allows us as people it gives us a tool to organize around these collective goals. And, suppose there's a part of Berlin, like stretch of the Spree, which is full of trash, and you say, wanted to organize some people to go clean it up. Like when you look at tragedy of the commons in the economics literature, it says, well, if everyone else does it, I don't have to do my part, right? And therefore you don't. But I think it's actually the other way around. Most people say, I'll happily go and help, but I don't want to be the only one if nobody else does. If you start a colony, you can just get started on something like this because there will be a record. We will be able to see you were there first, you've started, you've earned your reputation. There's much less of a hurdle to get started. And so you can, I don't want to go too far down this road, but I'm hoping that these kind of organizations, because it's so easy to get started and because there's no penalty for being the first one when there's nobody else helping it, there's a benefit to it. Might enable these kind of projects to get off the ground as well. And it doesn't, let's face it doesn't always have to be financial. Like sometimes recognition for something is enough. You just want you want there to be a record, you worked on this, you did this. Like I always say, it's amazing what people will do for fake internet points. right? And I don't mean that as a joke, it's really true. Like for upvotes, for kudos, for likes. So create a project around these common goals, let people start working on it, and there's a clear recognition of who's done how much and when. The reputation system will keep track of that. And then you can create a dynamic where more people start joining in, and maybe you will overcome some of these tragedies of the commons and address these goals. I'm hoping. I mean,
it's not the tragedy of the commons, it's the tragedy, I mean, it can get worse, right? Like, I don't like those people, I'm gonna make sure they're not in my colony, even though what I do affects them. It can get unpleasant.
Of course, it doesn't solve these issues of interpersonal rivalries. I'm just hoping that we can also address these problems that arise. But yes, of course. But I could run a colony in which I am dictator. And I have such a huge amount of reputation that I can constantly award tasks to me, so I will maintain my dictator status. That's okay too. This is a generic framework. It will not. And we want to have different levels of decision making within an organization. We could have like the boardroom voting at the top, the funding queue in the middle, but in the work group there's one dictator, because sometimes work groups work that way. You know, we discuss things, but at some point the guy says, nope, we're doing it this way. Fine. So the framework has to be that agnostic, and what we do with it is really up to us as humans. One more.
Yes. What is the incentive for participating in a colony? So you talk about earning fake internet points, but is there actual money involved?
Yeah, so it could be that you get paid for interacting with a colony. There's multiple different currencies or tokens that could be assigned as bounties. So some of them might act as just upvotes. Others would act as currency. Others might even act as like proportional, like an ownership of the colony as a whole. The way we envision it is if I create work and make a bounty in Ether, and you work on it, you get paid out in Ether, fine, that's all your interaction. You're an external contributor, you did your work, you got paid. You can also get paid in the colony's own token, and if you are willing to work for the colony's own token, then you will also earn reputation, and with it the ability to make decisions in that colony, and you become a part of this whole team. And that also enables you to claim rewards if the colony in future gets a lot of revenue. So it really depends on your level of interaction and what you're willing to work for. Some people might only work for things denominated in DAI. They say, I don't want to be part of this, I don't want to take part in governance, I just want to be paid to work. That's fine. But the thing about being paid in the colony's own tokens is it allows a colony to start without any upfront funds. Like we can start a colony, create our own accounting token and start paying each other with it, because we know that if funds come in the future, that will have a distribution of the tokens and the reputation to know exactly who would be owed how much. But again, it's up to each colony. It could be financial or it might not. It is flexible that way. And I think we're done. Thank you for listening, guys.